Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life, the podcast. You're listening to Author's Corner, where we highlight and showcase our local authors. Today, I am speaking to Dr. John Sottosanti, and we are going to be talking on the topic, the 4 levels of happiness. Happiness is something that we all aspire to have, to hold in our lives, but it's also one of the most elusive things. So, Dr. John and I are going to be talking about happiness today and the levels of happiness and how to climb the round to get up to the top of the ladder. So, welcome, John.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Myrna.
You're very welcome. All right, so let me give you a brief introduction. Dr. John Sottosanti is a surgeon, scientist, entrepreneur, educator, and the author of the Amazon bestseller, Mortal Adhesions: A Surgeon's Battles the 7 Deadly Sins to Find Faith, Happiness, and Inner Peace. John led a life where he achieved fame and fortune, but found that they did not lead to sustained happiness and peace. Quite the opposite. At the depth of despair, he discovered an ancient wisdom dating back to Aristotle and used it to find happiness and peace. I just came off of an interview earlier and I was recollecting that when I came into coaching, I was so amazed that almost all of my clients, when I first started, were people that have checked the boxes of success, but then they got to the top of the ladder and they found that they didn't find fulfillment. So, yes, it's exactly what Dr. John said. He achieved fame and fortune, but found it did not lead to happiness and peace. And we can add another word there, fulfillment. So, one of the things I want to start off our conversation with Dr. John is that we all know that we can have happiness when something good happens, when we get married, when we win some money, when we have a birth of a child, or something that we're happy for a short time. But how do we find sustained happiness if we want to start the conversation off there?
Okay, well, we can all go all the way back to Aristotle. And Aristotle defined happiness, and his lowest level of happiness was called instant gratification. We all have that. We win a tennis match after practicing hard. With me, I play a round of golf and I'm hot and sweaty. On the way home, I stop at Baskin Robbins ice cream and this particular ice cream cone that I love. And for 3, 4 minutes, I'm just happy as could be. And then it's gone. And so many of those things are like that. We have to have that. There's nothing wrong with level one. We will always have level one and we'll bask in level one, but it's fleeting. We have it and then it's gone. And so that's the negative of it. But look for those peak highs for sure.
Okay.
So if do you want me to see
Basically,
going up the ladder in a sec?
yeah, well, that's basically what I was talking about. You call it instant gratification. I call it situational happiness, which is the same thing. You're very right. So, we've got a lot to get into, but is there like a formula for sustained happiness, or do we have to climb the ladder to get it?
I think you pretty much have to climb the ladder, although you and in some of our correspondence had mentioned the pillars of happiness, and that probably takes us to someone like Martin Siegelman, who talked about the pillars of happiness, things that sustain you, and I think he talked about, positive emotions, and he talked about engagement, being active in something you really like to do, and relationships, being the more the better, of course, and have meaning and sense of purpose of your life. That's a horizontal way of looking at happiness. You could look at it at any point in time. I find more solace in looking at the various steps because I think as you climb the ladder of happiness, you get stronger because you can always be happy. But if something really bad happens, a child dies, a spouse is unfaithful and leaves you, those are unbelievable difficult situations, and so if you build up of strong levels of support, I think you can handle those much better. So that's pretty much what what I came to find out. And I really came to find it out after I had achieved all those wonderful things. My dad was born in Italy. And because he came over at a time when there was a strong anti Italian sentiment, particularly in the Northeast, in Connecticut, where we were, he always said to me, even as a little boy, John, you've got to study hard. You've got to become successful. You've got to be to him because he had become a civil engineer, but it wasn't good enough for him. He wanted his kids to have more. You've got to become a doctor and you've got to make a lot of money. Those are the two things that he drilled into me. So, I ended up going to an Ivy League college, and then I went on to graduate school and then postgraduate school in surgical training. Then I set up a big office and I lectured and I taught. I tried to do everything. I even had movie stars as patients. I came down to San Diego from LA. I had two or three Nobel Prize winners. In fact, the person who discovered DNA, Francis Crick, was my patient for 20 years. If you look at me from a distance, I had everything. I had a house overlooking the ocean and a new Mercedes-Benz, and USC paid me for world travel to teach courses for them. I mean, what could be better? And then it wasn't.
Really?
Things, things will happen, no matter how much you do. Pardon?
I said, wow, like I'm getting chills. I want to have that life.
Well, you do want to have it, but you want to build up all those other support systems so it doesn't come tumbling down. I ran into a dishonest contractor. We built out a big office. We paid him in full. He did a beautiful job, but he didn't pay his subcontractors. So we got letters from the city because liens were placed on the property and they were going to shut us down. My whole practice would have been shut down after spending this fortune. And we had to pay double. We had to pay the subcontractors because the contractor declared bankruptcy. And what could we do? So tremendous financial loss. And then one of my key employees was embezzling for 3 years before we found out about it. And then my partner and I were having difficulties. And then my wife was upset because I'm traveling so much and dedicating so much to my career. She wasn't very happy. And so we had all these things, and I started going into, I would call it depression, despair, whatever. But I had physical manifestations of those unfortunate situations. I mean, I had back pain, I had neck pain, I had stomach pain. And I can remember one night sitting in my Mercedes-Benz with the rooftop open, looking up at the sky with all the sparkling stars, and something made me say, God, and I didn't even know at that time if there was a God, call it higher power, God, if you're up there, all I want is inner peace. And that's the first time in my life that I ever submitted to anybody but myself. I was always the higher power. And it's amazing because things started happening once I realized that and submitted. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with a term called synchronicity. It's when unusual things happen that they are related, but you can't figure out why they're related. Like the very next day after saying, "If you're up there, please help me. All I want is inner peace." I went to the bookstore to find a novel, and I find this book on peace and happiness, got immersed in reading it, and then found out the author had 2 or 3 other books, read those, got his, uh, back then it was cassette tapes, put it in the car and would hear his voice. And within a month or 2, I was at the San Francisco airport and ran into him. We spent an hour talking to each other.
Kidding me. Wow.
There was things
Wow.
like that started happening to me. It was
Wow.
it's it was really cool. But, you've gotta work your way up the ladder, so we talked about
Yeah.
that.
Well, let me touch on the synchronicity before we go further. I learned from synchronicity from Deepak Chopra, and my first book, my first book was called "Becoming Conscious: My Awakening," and I specifically have things about synchronicity on there. You know how my life, fit together for me to get to where I am right now. It was nothing as obvious as yours, but I mean, things, synchronicity is coincidences that happen, like the guy at the airport and the book and things like that. So I'm big on synchronicity. And I love the fact that yes, I mean, I just finished talking about there. One of my episodes was there are no atheists in a foxhole. That whenever, even if you don't believe in God, when things are bad, you call out to Him. So I love where this conversation is going, and I love the fact that my goodness. This is such a deep conversation. The fact that you had all those things and I'm getting goosebumps. I want all those things. And then you started talking about about the money and relationships and no peace and you've got all this money and all these problems because they always say like, there's a saying that says higher level, higher devil. So
And that's what happened to me.
higher level, higher devil. So my gosh, this is such a beautiful, sweet conversation. And yes, inner peace is. I love how you put it in your book, faith and inner peace, because you have no peace about all these things. So that's great. So let's keep. So what you're saying is you can, I mean, I love what you talked about the pillars of happiness because yes, in there is purpose, which is basically what was happening to the people that were coming into the coaching conversation. They checked all these boxes, they had all this money, but they didn't have any purpose. But you were not saying that you weren't fulfilled because you were serving, you were a doctor, you were serving, so you had purpose. So let's talk about what you found from Aristotle. And before you say that, though, my definition of happiness was working towards a word, working towards something. Once you're working towards it, you're happy. Is that in there at all from Aristotle?
Goal setting is always good.
Okay.
I mean, absolutely. And that's the second stage
Okay.
because the second stage is achievement.
Okay.
And the good things about it are you get the wonderful things in life. And by the way, Myrna, I've been following you for several weeks now, and I'm so in awe of what you've done.
Thank you.
I really mean that. So don't
Thank you.
sell yourself short in any way whatsoever.
Mhm.
Yeah, really. We probably have somewhat similar backgrounds. I said dad came from Italy and he wanted his son to go places. So there
Yeah.
was that drive there. So,
Mhm.
yeah, the thing about the next level, which is achievement, is that achievement is based in a sense on comparison. I've got this house. My house is better than your house. My house is on the ocean. Yours is way inland. You
Yeah.
still like that. Even if you practice every day to be a great tennis player, right? You get better and better. You win a tournament. You go to the next level. You win a tournament. Sooner or later, you're going to lose, right?
Mhm.
So it's comparative. And then if you don't have other support systems, what do you do then? So you've got to be ready for those moments of setback because you will have moments of setback. And before I give Aristotle all the credit, I want to add somebody else, a modern day philosopher whose name is Robert Spitzer. He's the one that took Aristotle's work and really put it into the four levels of happiness. And I like to think of it as a ladder where you've got to climb the ladder. And we'll talk about the higher levels of the ladder, but you never stay at the top level. You're always dropping back to instant gratification, comparative or competition type of things. And so I did
Okay,
that a
keep
little.
going. So we're at instant gratification. We're at achievement, which is number two. What's number three?
Number three is looking beyond yourself. So contribution, contributive phase, where you start thinking about that poor person maybe sitting on the sidewalk with a can. Um, and I never thought about those things early on because I was so self-centered. But I found an organization or a school in the inner city of San Diego, and I went to a few meetings, and they were taking these kids who no one in the family ever went to college. They were taking these kids at no cost to them because there were donors, and I became one of them, in which the kids could go to class and get a college preparatory education. And it was grueling because they would come in at 7 o'clock in the morning and start studying for an hour before the teacher came in. And they'd stay till like 7 o'clock at night. I guess they served them some food. But they spent like 12 hours a day on academics. And they got into the best high schools and some of the best colleges in the country because I followed it for 15 years. So
So
that was really,
you
really fun.
you contributed to their college prep or their college education after they finished the prep?
Well, here the way it worked was you give your major donation during the college prep period. really middle school. I met the one that I spent probably the most time with. I met her when she was in the 6th grade. She was a shy little girl, Mexican heritage, would hardly look at me. And I'll tell you, within 4 years, she was dynamic. She got into one of the best schools in the country. Uh, to see that take place, and then I gave her a little bit for books and things like that in college, and the school helped coordinate all that. So it was really, really great.
Well, that's beautiful. Yeah, because I understand now, because if you do well, you get a scholarship. So you don't need that, that's why we do the college prep. You don't need to pay for the education, but you get a but as you were talking, I mean, and this is you know, not a very good aside, but as you were talking, I remember the Tuskegee Institute when I read Booker T. Washington's book about how, the Negroes, when they wanted education, same situation that they had to go to night school, and in order to work their way up to college, and they would go to night school. They worked during the day, and but when you've got a will, you've got a way. If you want an education, whether you're black, brown, or whatever, if your parents can't afford it, then that's the way you got to do it. So that was amazing. All right. Yes. And that is the contribution that I was talking about, that you can't find happiness unless you're serving other people. And you mentioned that, yeah, even though you were doing all these different things and you were serving your clients, but they were like paying you. So maybe it wasn't, you didn't get as much fulfillment for it. But when you were giving yourself away for free, that's when that's when you got the fulfillment. Is that the right way for me to
Oh, that's
label it?
true. That's true. You can only but, the ego is something that's, difficult to understand because you need a certain amount of ego to achieve things, to bring yourself up, to get to a certain level. But if the ego gets out of hand, it takes over and you do the opposite to other people. Sometimes you have to push other people aside to get to the top. You don't wanna do that. You wanna be considerate of the other person. And so they'll learn a lot of lessons in life. Well, that's the reason why well, let's talk about, the 4th level in a sense, getting there. Well, one of the things I had to do, and Aristotle talked about this, is to bring virtue into your life. Because I picked up an article one day on the 7 deadly sins, and I went through them. I'm gonna just say them really fast. Pride, envy, anger, greed, gluttony, lust, and sloth. I had every one of them. Right, yeah, you have to read my book to know what they all were. But
Wow. Hey, that's being transparent. I like it.
yeah, no, that's the way the book was written. You gotta get rid of them one by one because they are, the name of the book is Mortal Adhesions. Well, I use the term adhesions because it's a surgical term. If you have abdominal surgery, you may suffer from post-surgical adhesions where there's scar tissue formed and the organs stick to each other, and just moving will cause intense pain. So adhesions cause pain. But I like to think of adhesions as a metaphor for addictions that stick
Mm.
to us as tightly that we can't get rid of. They're so hard to get rid of, but you can do it. But that needs to be part of the happiness. And so many of the happiness courses don't get into that. But I feel you have to because I lived through it. And so I'm going to be totally honest. There may be a few things I won't tell you, but most things I will.
Wow. Yes. Well, you know what? That's a new one for me because I've heard all the other ones before, but that's a new one for me. So let's talk about this virtue. So what you're saying is, in order to find happiness, you've got to get rid of the 7 deadly sins, um, and just become what? When you say virtue, what do you mean?
Oh, yeah.
Kind,
Tell me.
passion. Okay.
Yeah, you have to have all those things. Compassion is a huge part of it.
Okay.
And gratitude but justice, truth, justice, integrity are all part of virtue. And that ties in with the 4th level. The highest rung of the ladder is called transcendence, where we transcend the lower self, where we're bogged down by all these addictions or adhesions, and we begin to break free. We begin to see the value of virtue. We start thinking about topics such as why am I here? Who created me? Is there something beyond this? Is there an after death life in a sense? Those are all deep seated questions. Not everybody will take them there, and not everybody has to go there. There's a scientist that I just learned about recently. I'm sure you haven't heard of him. I didn't. His name is David Bruce, and he lived in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. And for 15 years, he became engrossed in studying the tsetse fly of Africa. Have you heard of the tsetse fly?
No,
I had
I've
to
heard of
worry
him,
about
and
it.
I've
I
not
heard
heard of the fly.
the tsetse fly. It's a little tiny fly, but it spread a terrible disease called the sleeping sickness. That's the easy way of saying it. It has a long other name too. And it took him 15 years to figure it all out, but he immersed himself during those years to find the solution to help all these suffering people. And he must have been a wonderful guy because, well, in the 1800s, people barely lived to 50 years old.
Mm,
He lived to 75 years old.
mm,
He married a woman who he stayed with for the full lifetime, 50 years of marriage,
hmm.
and she died, and he ended up dying actually at her funeral 3 days later. Talk about a day.
Stories they shot before. What? Okay.
That is a dedication. I don't know anybody.
I've heard stories about that before. When you have long couples together, when one dies, the next one dies right after. So I've heard that part. Okay, so what was his research on the fly? How does that equate to happiness? How does that lend
No, I think
itself?
what gave him meaning. That was his meaning.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
I had, somebody who did, I'd say, did quite well, certainly did professionally. Um, he didn't really have a good sense of the divine, let's say, or the spiritual, but his big thing was helping mankind solve the problems of life, and his big discovery was the DNA molecule. His name was Francis Crick, so I knew him really well.
Right.
And until his deathbed in his 70s, he studied every aspect of the human body that he possibly could. The one thing he couldn't solve what was, and I discussed this with him, he wanted to solve the secret of consciousness.
Mm,
Couldn't do it.
yeah, yeah.
He could
They're
feel
still
it
working on
kicking
that one.
up. And I don't know, Myrna, if you're, familiar with the, near-death experiences.
Yes.
They're amazing. I just read a couple, recently. You can
I've
read them all the
interviewed
time.
I've interviewed several people on my show who've been through near-death experiences, so I'm aware of them, and I've read several books on it too. So I understand that. But again, I mentioned Deepak Chopra before. He is one of the premier scientists on this consciousness
Yes.
thing. So
I'm a
yeah,
student, and I'm a student of his in a way. I took the, meditation course at the Deepak Chopra Institute in
really.
Lo
Yes, yes. I haven't taken any of his courses. They're darn too expensive. But one of my goals is to go away to one of his retreats, and yeah, but yes, I love him. But yeah, consciousness is a big thing. He still talks about it. Nobody knows where the mind is. Nobody knows what consciousness is, and I'm aware of it. So yes, if this their scientists are still trying to solve that. But yeah, let's get back to the transcendence part. So explain that a little bit more. Now, are you saying that if we don't get to transcendence, we don't get happiness?
well, I think it supports happiness because there's all kinds of happiness. The question is the happiness level that you're at, is it capable of sustaining you through some of the terrible situations like the loss of a child or a loss of a spouse or in my situation, I had a really tough time when, in a sense, I lost my work, and I lost it because of age, retirement. It reaches a point where you decide you don't want to do surgery anymore,
Right.
and that was really difficult because that's who I was. I was known as one, and my faith actually did help me eventually get through that. I did a lot of praying. That's all I can say. No, I was in a foxhole. I was in a foxhole and I had to dig myself out of it.
My father is 85 and still working. And I know that when he loses his work, then he is gonna, get down into depression because it's something that he did. And that's why they say that people should never retire. You should leave one job and do something else because once you're not useful, then you go into decline. So I understand what you're saying. But it's very true. As you were talking, there's several, I'm in this space. So thank you for saying that you follow me and I'm doing well and all that. But I read a lot and I understand a lot and I follow the Indian gurus and because they're the ones that's got the spirituality thing down back. And one of the people that I follow would say something like, "This too shall pass." So you never latch on to the happiness, you never latch on to the sadness because it will pass. You just go through life, right? And just don't get deep with anything. And the Buddha talk about suffering, that, the same kind of thing. You, the Indian gurus talk about that. But it's very hard to be happy when someone is stealing from you. It's very hard to be happy if your kid dies. It's very hard to be happy if you find your husband is of 25 years has betrayed you. But yeah, what if we were to leave something behind from this conversation is that just like how happiness is fleeting, that sadness should be fleeting as well. You work through it. You work through the process. And this too shall pass. Is that your what would you have to say to that comment?
Yeah, well, I have to say that you have to look at life in general and things will happen. In fact, there's a popular book out today called Let Them. Let them cut you off. Let them
I started reading that. Is that from Mel Robbins? To let them.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. Well, I used to honk on the horn like you would not believe, which, I came from the New York area. It's common back there, but it isn't in Southern California. So I had to learn not to do that. But I became much more accepting. I read this book called Love is Letting Go of Fear, where people come from either love or they come from fear. And people who are honking their horn and doing bad things to you are all coming from the source of fear. And you want to teach and preach love. And that's what it's all about, I think.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. This is such a great conversation. I'm enjoying this
I'm
tremendous.
enjoying it too. Do we have to end it?
I know we're coming out almost to the end of time. So, all right. So, tell us about your book. It is called Let's see where it is. Mortal adhesion.
Mortal.
Mortal
Because we
adhesion.
all mortal. We're all gonna die, right? And we gotta get rid of the adhesions before we die and get to that
Before you die. Okay. All right. I love
that's
that.
what we have to do.
Surgeons battle the seven deadly sins to find faith, happiness, and inner peace. So, yeah. So, why did you write it, and what do you want readers to walk away with after reading?
Okay, I wrote it because I went through all stages myself, including the suffering stages, including, I had a dire cancer diagnosis about that 15 years ago, but fortunately, I beat it. I went through the, quote, "depression" of retiring after a wonderful, successful career. And I used the 4 levels to get me through all that and to stay up there. And so you're never gonna be at the highest level all the time, but you gotta work towards getting up to it. And so you gotta my book, if you go through it and, it's a lot it isn't reading a textbook. I try to make it fun. There's lots of stories in there. My life stories because I lived through it. They're all in there, and that's what I did. And then I came up with this acronym just recently to help people remember the 4 levels, okay? It's I ACT. I is for instant gratification. It's wonderful. I love the ice cream cones, but it's not gonna get me through tough times.
Mhm.
And the second one is competitiveness and achievement, and we all do that. I mean, I did, I was steeped into that as much as anybody. I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today if I didn't do all that. I was a Tony Robbins fan and a Wayne Dyer maybe before your time. I don't know, but
Listen, we're on the same path because Tony Robbins is who got me started on this journey. And Wayne Dyer books that I read, The Power of Attention. I love all that. Right.
I love Dwayne Dyer and all the stuff that he taught me too. So that's where I got my synchronicity from. Well, I could go on and on stories of that. So getting back to I act. So we're going through the different levels, and so we've gone through instant gratification, achievement, and then the third one is contribution. If you're not contributing to people and society and helping other people and not getting gain from it, because if you help somebody to get something in return, that's not the same thing. That's more competition and achievement. So you want to go ahead and give some part of yourself away and not get anything back in return. And then work towards developing the virtues, getting rid of the seven deadly sins, finding your God and that means different things to different people, or at least find something like the tsetse fly experiment to help humanity. So that's I decided I wanted to do that, and I dedicate my life at this point in time to helping other people, and any money, if I ever to make it off the book, is gonna go to charity anyway, so
That's beautiful. But you know what? I'm going to pick up a copy. Is it on Audible?
I'll send you a copy on oil. I will.
Thank you. Yes, because I'm fascinated. I love learning. Yeah, and there's a couple of things in there I would love to learn about. Yes. So thank you. All right. Well, listen, this was a delightful conversation. I'm like really perked up. Yeah, I'm like really perked up. I thought that I could just label happiness working towards a goal. And once you're working towards something, you'll always be happy because that's always worked for me. But I hear you when you can be working towards something and something throws you offline, or somebody cheats on you, or someone dies, and then that what you're working towards, you might not even go continue working towards it because you're sidelined by
Right.
what's happening. So I love that. I love that.
It's all in the book.
Yeah, it's all in the book, right? Yeah, I can tell. Yes, I definitely want to learn from you. Well, listen, you've had a great career. You're successful. You're living in a beautiful city. Yeah, you came from Italy, or your parents did, and so that's amazing. I love that. I'm from Toronto. I went through Guyana, Toronto, Florida, but there's a huge Italian population in Toronto. That's why I mentioned it. So I didn't know that they have a huge population here too. So that's great. Okay, so listen, thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode of Author's Corner. This was a great conversation about the four levels of happiness. Excuse me. And Dr. John and I were talking about the pillars of happiness, the levels of happiness, the seven deadly sins. Go pick up a copy of his book. It's available on Amazon. Tell our listeners how they can connect with you. What's your website if you have one?
Yeah, I do. I do. It's the title of the book, all put together with no period between. It's Mortal, Mortal, adhesions, adhesions.com, mortaladhesions.com. You can read through the different pages, but go to the contact page, and in there is how to contact me. So I'll be happy to communicate with you.
Okay, beautiful. Are you on social media?
More LinkedIn than anything else.
LinkedIn.
But,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. I'll link out to your LinkedIn
Mhm.
profile when I post a clip of our conversation. Yes.
Right.
Well, listen, guys, I hope that you guys were inspired and turned on as much as I was from this conversation on happiness, how to sustain it. We all know about the instant gratification happiness, or you probably haven't heard about the other ones. So go and learn about it, bring it to your awareness, bring it to your consciousness. And, the first thing to make any kind of change is becoming aware of it. And if you're not aware of it, you can't change anything. So become aware of it, pick up a copy of Dr. John's book and, read it and be on your way to sustained happiness. I'm going to read it. So I hope you do too. All right, Dr. John, it was a pleasure talking to you as we wrap up. Any last words?
No, I just want to say that Yeah, life does get better if you do go through the 4 levels, and you can't stay there all the time. I'll say that over and over again. So you're gonna be dropped going down, but many people only live at the first 2 levels
Yes.
and don't go on being there. But that's when you get that diagnosis of cancer or you get that child that dies, whatever it is, you need more support in life.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely, absolutely agree. You know, which is basically what Buddha's teaching is that there is going to be suffering, and you've got to prepare for it, and you've got to figure out a way to get through it because we're all going to suffer. So, I like that. Awesome. So this is your buffer against suffering.
Lord.
Yes. Yes. All right. Listen, thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you, Dr. John, for being on the show and sharing the 4 levels of happiness. Um, uh, Go ahead and pick up a copy of his book. Leave a comment on YouTube if this is resonating with you. And definitely, subscribe to the YouTube channel and also review the show because I would love that. Okay, so thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Dr. John. Until next time, namaste.
Namaste.